For the past 5 years, Pokemon has had me deadlocked in the most obnoxious on-again, off-again relationship this side of Nick at Night.
You are not my father!
Which is wild, right? We're talking about the most successful franchise on planet Earth. Cute creatures get tough when you make them fight. How could you possibly mess this up? Have you been on the internet?
Here.
It's a war zone! Looky here. I'm one of those people. I consider Black and White to be the best generation, which is strange considering it isn't the generation I grew up with. Like all my balding buddies, I also spent long road trips playing Red through the ghastly green screen of a Game Boy, so it should come as no surprise that my second favorite games are Fire Red and Leaf Green. Hey, lucky for us, it looks like Generation 5 is up next for a remake. Awesome, great, super! I am so worried that they're gonna mess this up. Yeah, with Pokemon's recent output, I think we're all at least a little disappointed with the content on display, so let's take some time to discuss what made Unova so great and what hasn't been working recently. You can break this video into 3 big slices: visuals, story, and challenge. We're gonna cross-examine against the recent games and start writing out our Christmas wishes for what might make this remake remarkable. As always, this video is a thinly veiled and extremely biased love letter to the 5th generation and is propelled by vibes alone, so spoilers! This is just about the only campaign I genuinely consider interesting, so go ahead and jump in the water before you get splashed. To start off, I want to go over the one uniting theme that threads Unova together: big cities, and how we get to them. Say what you want about Game Freak, believe me, I will. They always nail a sense of wonder. Even in their first outing, naming the towns after colors and numbering routes sequentially empowers that feeling of being on an adventure made for you. While you won't find more than a handful of buildings or people to speak with, they make the most of each environment to give every area its own personality. Just wander on over to Lavender Town and tell me you don't immediately understand the vibe. But as picturesque as Kanto and Johto can be, they never truly give you any visual reason to believe you're traversing much more than a handful of grassy roads while stopping by dollhouse villages. That is, until we rolled up to Unova. They never gave up on what worked. At its core, you'll still find a flat view pixel art game. They just took that foundation and built a freakishly large mansion on top of it. From your first steps, you can see the newfound little town detail by all the leafy flurries crossing your screen. Peek the rippling water meeting the brook to set the setting of a town on a sweet spring day. Later on, you'll find sandstorms, downpours, blizzards, all of which can be predicted through the terminals bookended on each route. Depending on the time of day, the sunlight casts a new shade of life, and while Black and White aren't the first to follow a clock, they certainly up the ante by incorporating seasons. For example, in the process of making this video, my game naturally swapped from spring to summer, the detail of which completely blew me away. The colors, the flora, the music, even the Pokemon can change with the passage of time, creating this unbelievable sense that the world we're exploring is constantly moving even while we're away. Take Icarus City. This is the home of the Ice Gem. If you rolled up here in the winter, you get just about what you expect: tons of snow and ice to slide on. I met this city in the summer, so instead of them sticking to a die-hard aesthetic, the icy tundra transformed into wetlands. All the people are out enjoying the sunshine, and even the windmill is happy to be moving again. Some of you may be wondering what makes a windmill wonderful, and I get that. Let's open the scope to something even the most cynical champion can understand. After your first gym, you spend a good bit of time in this woodland area. The air hangs heavy while the trees cast a sunless sky. Weirdos hiding in bushes. It's the whole 9 yards. Finishing your excursion, you get the go-ahead to continue down the main route, and from the dark, intimate nature, you immediately arrive here. In this instant, your horizon expands indefinitely. The camera pulls down to greet the pale blue sky, while an enormous bridge leads to a city we can barely make out. In one single moment, you understand this isn't gonna be like any other game. The tasteful use of basic 3D adds this impounding weight to architecture. The camera is destined to follow you through any curve on the road. They're always making sure to get the most out of these sections, creating dynamic angles to ensure you get the best seat in the house for any occasion. And all of this is just build-up to what the cities are actually like. For the first time, you can see sprawling spires in the sky. The streets are buzzing with little dudes trying to get their day done, totally projected from the city center all the way to the harbor. Castilia City oozes personality down to its finest details. And I get it. When you look at a powerful circulating civilization in 2.5D, it can be hard to understand how incredible this leap in quality is. Don't forget that just a few years ago, this is what they considered a mountain to look like. Castilia may be the main jewel in Black and White's crown, but make no mistake, there is so much more to see. The rustic flow of Nasserine, the weightlessness of Mistral Dawn, and if you haven't rolled into Driftville City and heard that music kicked in, you have truly never lived. Okay, this elaborate gushing may seem like overkill, but that's only because I can describe the past decade of Pokemon through my favorite margarine product. I can't believe it's not Unity! That's right, I'm gonna stand up for this one. This barren, floaty, clipping mess of outputs certainly didn't start with Sword and Shield, but I think that's when we started seeing the cracks. It only took a few minutes to feel the lack of cohesive design, run up to any corner and feel the world shrink in. It's like every zone was designed by a different team then glued together at the end, creating this inconsistent flow that immediately tears you out of the atmosphere. When you move into 3 dimensions, your audience inherits a whole new level of disbelief to suspend, and these half-hearted gestures and soulless faces might be in line with the handheld's handbook, but it definitely feels like you're trapped in a grocery bag. The worst part is, it don't even run good. How can this game be chugging to a halt when the view distance is just about as long as my arm? Why would I want to explore this open world when it's made out of this untextured looking Play-Doh-ass barren Barbie's first hellscape looking ass world? And this is their mainline games we're talking about. I would rather dip Black and White into that gelatinous nightmare than even begin to consider doing them like they did Diamond and Pearl. Visually, this is awful. I don't want to hear any ifs, ands, or buts about it. This very literal translation of the original look does a horrible disservice to the very idea of remaking a game. You have all the resources you could ever imagine to take these brilliant, shining games into the modern world, and you chose to do basically nothing. Honestly, it's worse than nothing. I would have preferred you just rip the original games and charge us $60 to legally run an emulator. I already figured you were gonna gouge us on the price, so you might as well just take off the mask. If you somehow got it in your head to cease this nightmare, I could think of a handful of ways to correct the nosedive. Alright, I'm gonna sit back down. Let's see. So much of Black and White's aesthetic plays off the simple nature of pixel art, confidently laying down these bold black outlines for every Pokemon with simple animations to breathe in a believable life. I'm not gonna say this game is gorgeous, but it certainly has its moments that ride the line of a watercolor painting, surrounding that with the Art Deco cityscape, and you get this intensely unique atmosphere. If I was king for a day, I would want this remake to take a couple pages from Octopath Traveler. I get that's a huge ask. We're talking about a totally different developer making a different game with a totally different mindset, but just think about it. Imagine all this pristine pixel art, the shimmering water and forced focus only hinting at the immaculate landscape behind you. Imagine seeing Castilia City in this kind of detail, crossing this bridge, climbing the tower, battling with other Pokemon with this glistening design behind every monster, constantly changing the background details with every new environment. This would respect the original vision and pursue an excellent rendition beyond anything I could hope for. And at the very least, I just hope they don't kick in the teeth of the gentle formula with that plastic coating of minimal effort we've been buying for the past few years. Alright, hopping off the visual train, we touch on one of the most critical aspects Gen 5 brings to the table: courage. So many hallmarks of the series are pushed away to make room for new ideas, completely doing away with the stale and simplistic in the successful effort to renew its story, progression, and difficulty. Just to keep it one chundo, as far as the story goes, this isn't actually a Herculean feat. The baseline writing in any Pokemon game makes paper feel like it's putting on weight. I'll break it down for you. You are a special child with the whole world eating out of your palm. The only real opposition you find is in your rival, and most of the time they're either a comical bastard or annoyingly loyal. You can totally pick and prod the same issues in black and white, but the devil is in the details. Instead of any singular rival, you get two buddies named Bianca and Charon. Charon is your traditional travel mate, extreme go-getter focused on victory and bag obtainment while making up the more challenging intermittent squabbles. Bianca pulls the Alliance card, a ditzy diehard buddy that's quick to encourage you through thick and thin. The thing is, they don't stay that way. Throughout the story, they grow and flesh out as individual characters. Just take a look at this familial backlash. Bianca's father hates the idea of her going out on a pokey adventure and screams at her before you even get started, a huge difference from the usual mom send-offs we've come to expect. Her dad worries that she isn't strong enough to take on the world, that she doesn't have the grit or talent to become the Pokemon champion. And the wild thing is that he's totally correct. Through failure, she begins to understand that she isn't very skilled in combat and faces far more backlash than Charon and you will ever find. We all know, as the video game player, being the greatest in the world is expected of us because we bought the video game, but there can only be one champion, right? They handle this in a surprisingly nuanced way. By working with the professor, Bianca finds her home in the study of Pokemon, making an appearance at the beginning of the sequels to send you off with a Pokédex. And while Charon might be the traditional skill check character, they dive into that archetype in a genuinely interesting way. By speaking with different veterans of the Unova region, he's challenged to understand what he wants. At first, this is simple. He wants to be the best. But then what? What drives someone to be the best at battling? And what do you do when you succeed? What will you do when someone better comes to best you? We'll address that nightmare later. For now, we have a secret third character to talk about. That's right, I'm talking about In, the best and worst character in this game. Doing away with the classic overly evil antagonist, In represents the moral dilemma this game chose to pose. Are Pokemon friends or tools? This isn't a new concept, mind you. Even the very first title placed Team Rocket directly in our narrative to flesh out a creamy moral center to the journey. It's more that the face of our question has grown a nuanced stubble. Early on, you can find Team Plasma protesting, pleading to the crowd that owning Pokemon is abusive and against their natural way. Initially, you think this may be more of an insightful encounter, doing away with the black hat outwardly evil shtick to try and ask bigger questions of the player. As you can probably guess, this falls apart almost immediately when you run into the uniformed crew and start to see those rusty old story gears spinning back to life, all except for one character. Within the audience is a guy trying to conceal themselves with a hat and a jacket, but their hair betrays them with obvious anime character syndrome. This is In, a lime-colored stranger that will ask you bizarre questions only to fight you in the streets. You see, this dude can actually speak with Pokemon at the cost of struggling to communicate with people. Some of you are gonna relate with that, please don't. Later on, you'll share one of the most memorable moments in the game, riding the Ferris wheel where he reveals that he is, in fact, the leader of Team Plasma. I'm all about this. This is the first time a leader of a rival team doesn't come across as a maniacal psychopath. See, somewhere in all his questions is genuine intrigue. In isn't looking to dissuade your adventure, instead taking his time to understand his place in the world, actively forming his understanding of human relationship with Pokemon through our perspective. Combining this interaction with your companion, they've made this beautiful balance of a story progressively told through 3 points. The care of Bianca, the challenge of Charon, and the philosophy of In constantly reoccurring within the story like triplets that make up the rhythm section of the 5th generation. The only sour note in this symphony is the ending, where they replace the importance of In with Getsus, to ensure that our finale can still have us defeat an unmistakably bad guy and rise to the top of the food chain free of any moral dilemma. I'm not saying that the path of the champion needs to have an underlying melancholic tone, just that Black and White opened the can of worms and refuses to admit that they ruined the carpet. Even so, I still commend Game Freak for attempting to peek under the curtain here, choosing to give each of us something to think about over the stock standard easy breezy stories played over and over the games made for home consoleolos. And speaking of which, you want to talk about the recent rivals? Easy. I really hate Hop, but Nimona is pretty cool. Originally, I wrote out a whole exploration of what separates these characters, but this is a Black and White video, and it's not like they're gonna change the rival buddies, so I'll save you from that. Instead, let's talk about what they should do to improve the story. First option, Occam's Razor. Nothing. Don't do nothing. Don't touch nothing. Leave it alone. Leave it. If y'all find it's far too difficult to follow that line of thought, I can think of one way to remaster the story. One of the cornerstones of Black and White lays in the Sea Gear, a communication gadget housing the whole internet side of the game. This is where you can link up with your real buddies to throw down a few battles or trade some dudes. It was so critical to the game's ecosystem that 90% of the time, the bottom screen is completely dedicated to its functionality. Now that we're in the whimpering 20s, I don't think this infrastructure will be of any use, so why not take these hyper-janky meetup stations and scope some style from another RPG? I might not be a Persona kinda guy, but from what I've played, this series absolutely nails the interpersonal relationships you carry through the story. Something about the snappy UI, the group text evolving into a rooftop meetup, the bond between you and your friends is strong and believable. More so than the Sea Gear, dedicate these walkie-talkie sections and reoccurring conversations to a new sort of interlaced communication channel, inviting this intricate web of information that can further our understanding of the characters we already love, while opening the door to not awful co-op. I get all of this is a long shot, so honestly, I just hope that they can leave Black and White's story alone. It always makes me sad to see the more out-of-character Nintendo stuff get tossed out in a remaster. Another thing I hope they leave alone is the difficulty. A lot of things come to mind when you talk about Pokemon, but challenging gameplay is about as rare as a shiny. As a personal sandbag, I always play these games with the battle type on set instead of shift. Not only does this mean I get to skip 1,000 text boxes asking me if I want to change my Pokemon, but it feels like a more honest way to fight. Outside of a few holdout battles from the past, Black and White made for the first truly difficult games in the franchise. The easiest place to find this newfound challenge is in the multifaceted gyms along the way. Your very first gym leader is interchangeable, making sure they match you against your starter's weakness and encouraging you to level an advantageous ape and learn the basics of team building. Even the normal type gym lulls you into a false sense of comfort with an easy herdier only to retaliate with a watchhog. And the electric gym is another huge standout. You'd think rocking a ground type would solve your problems, but Emolga puts a stop to that real quick. You see, ground attacks don't work against flying dudes, and I goofed my way into letting this squirrel get 4 double teams off. This one fight took 10 real minutes to finish, and I enjoyed every sweat-dripping second of it. I also love that they had the guts to finish with a straight-up dragon-type gym. This was before Fairy was introduced as a counter, so you best find a dragon and level it up properly to finish the challenge. And it's important to keep in mind that I am skipping over a few steamrolls. Picking Tepig means that the bug and ice matchups don't pose much of a challenge, but what they lack in offense, they more than make up for in identity. Pushing your way through the honey barriers, figuring out the icy curves, getting launched out of a cannon only to slam your face Looney Tunes style. When I think back on every badge, I only have good things to say about their unique qualities. But let's not dwell on the glitz and the glamour. If you were looking for unmistakable challenge, all you have to do is wander on over to the Elite Four. The qualified Quattro have never been easy, but depending on the type spread, you can generally get the job done without much dissonance. Not here, baby. We're talking about Ghost, Dark, Psychic, and Fighting, and there won't be any swapping or shopping during these 4 fights, so you best make sure your team is ready to go. I'm gonna choose to lose all my credibility here and admit that I am also one of those people. You know the type. Overlevel your starter and refuse to trade them out until absolutely necessary. I even taught my Embor Grassnod just so I can take on water types, praying that they'll OHKO before I have to strategize. That does not fly here. I had a serious lack of Psychic on my team and I suffered greatly. So much so that I had to go back to find a Solosis just to grind them up to a Reuniclus on Victory Road. This is one of the first times I have ever had to actively grind in a Pokemon game, let alone learn how a proper team works as a unit while putting my trust into any other creature outside of my starter. By the time I was indoctrinated in the final Hall of Champions, I believed in every one of my Pokemon, and without the genuine challenge of this game, I don't think this victory would have had nearly as much impact. In fact, I can prove that because I beat Sword and Shield multiple times just about as easy as I roll out of bed in the morning, and I don't think that has anything to do with elite gaming skill. This easy creep between the games can be broken down into 2 elements: XP sharing and Game Freak's incessant need to sell things to children. See, I love how Black and White deals with XP share. There are 2 items out in the world that let other Pokemon in your party leech experience without ever seeing a fight. This doesn't hurt the challenge for a few reasons. You have to actively find these machines in 2 semi-hidden spots. The XP shared also takes experience away from the Pokemon that's fighting, and it only works on 2 dudes at a time, meaning you will need to tactically choose your backpackers for any leveling you need to get done. Come X and Y and that goes right out the window. Everyone gets experience for every fight. Grinding is a thing of the past and you can literally level a Pokemon to the max without ever sending it into battle. If I was gonna damn the current games with fine praise, this is extremely convenient. In interviews, they've stated that this new mechanic was directly made for us aging gamers, as they understand that we don't have all that childhood free time, meaning this simple change takes a lot of mindless hours out of any adventure. I do appreciate that, but y'all took it way further than you needed to. In the first 6 generations, your rival would always pick the Pokemon that had a type advantage against you. Blue picking a Squirtle to your Charmander meant you had a strong water type you would need to face on a cyclical basis. Once we stepped on the Sun and Moon, the rival began choosing the Pokemon weak to our typing. This might not seem like a big deal when your first battle is always a tackle-off, but it is indicative of how Game Freak perceives their audience. Let's take a quick pause here. You are now 23 minutes into a video where a grown man is complaining that Pokemon isn't as good as it was when he was a kid. You will hear many arguments over the vast internet landscape that are going to poke and prod at this kind of content by demanding that we all acknowledge that Pokemon is for children. To anyone that might be currently thinking that, I only have one thing to say. I totally agree. Pokemon is for children and is marketed as such. But so is gum. So is riding a bike and playing outside on a sunny day. So are cartoons and cereal and singing songs and getting excited about playing a video game you enjoy. Unless you are actively sitting there joylessly drinking black coffee and smoking a cigarette while staring at an Excel spreadsheet, I think we can all agree that childish things can be enjoyed as adults, especially things that we once adored when we were young. The reason I make this distinction is for all of you that are young or have children that are just beginning to enjoy things. Do we all really believe that your generation is dumber than ours? I don't think so, but I can't say Game Freak feels the same way. If anything, the new Pokemon games should be getting harder, as that inclined difficulty is what pushes people to understand effort values and optimal team building, turning them into die-hard fans. All of this might just be an existential way to point out a matter of preference, but I can say for a fact that adding these easy mode elements as the base settings for a Gen 5 remake will take away that really special part of exploring Unova. Please don't try to solve a problem that simply does not exist. To finish up this video, we need to look back at the relationship between Alder and Sharon, as there is a ton of wisdom we can glean from their arc. You see, when our rival speaks with the ex-champion, it's like a mirror to his own future self and a reality check for us playing the game. Sharon only cares about getting stronger as a trainer, focused on becoming the champion and nothing else, something that Alder knows all too well. The very first thing he asks Sharon is why, stumping a poor boy who has only ever considered questions beginning with how and when. The concept of what being the best means to him and what he would do with such a great accomplishments echoes through the virtual world, resonating back to us playing on the other side of the screen. What compels us to come back to these particular games? Sure, the combat loop is fun, but is that truly it? When we look back on this decades-old code, there must be some kind of mystic pull asking us to care more than the numbers afford. Whether it's growing with our starter, planning our team out, all the critical hits, or getting stopped by a bad call, there's a certain slant of light asking us to peek behind the curtain of victory and look at the journey underway. It must be that same magic that makes Pokemon irreplaceable. Most of us learned this series while we learned how to read, and that kind of nostalgia doesn't fade easily. Even the hungriest indie devs cannot replace Pokemon, because honestly, they're strangers. No matter how many great ideas and quality mechanics you bring to the table, you simply did not grow up with us. Sadly, Game Freak knows this. It's why Pokemon is the most financially successful franchise in the world. They knew this when they included all of Kanto in Silver and Gold. They knew this when they remade the first generation, and they certainly knew this when they only let you find new Pokemon for the entirety of Black and White, only to shower us with memories in the post-game. They took the time and risked a hell of a lot to give us a pair of games that genuinely meant something, that still means something to a lot of us, and the world is a better place because of that. All I ask, as a complete stranger that has loved your games for most of my life, is that you do not ruin that magic. Please don't ruin that perfect balance. Please don't ruin the last high point of a tumultuous saga of games. Please don't ruin the Black and White remake. You already know I want to give a shout out to Brumna, Lee, Post Mesmeric, Seth Peacock, Thomas, and Vindalin for their support on Patreon. If you would also like to support the channel, consider joining the Patreon, becoming a member of the channel, or just joining the Discord. That's where we like to hang out. This video took so much longer to make than I thought it was going to. Originally, I was just writing a script because I was a little nostalgic. Figured I'd play me some Pokemon White, kind of go down memory lane, all that, and it just spiraled out of control. Though I do think that's for the best. I learned a lot of things while I was making it, being able to finally nail down what I don't like about modern Pokemon, and weirdly, discovering that I really love Pokemon Sun and Moon. I don't think I ever played it beforehand, but just needing to capture a couple bits of footage from that game, I was sucked into playing for a couple of hours. It's just the music, the entire energy around that game, it's really good. So if you haven't tried that one, definitely check out Sun and Moon. After this video, I want to get back to a more consistent schedule, but one that works a little bit better with the different facets of my life, so expect to see videos every other week. It might be a little bit quicker than that, might take a little bit longer depending on the actual content of the video, but I feel like I'd be able to consistently do every other week and be able to get content that is up to the quality standards I want to meet, while still, not pushing myself so hard that I burn out, or taking so long to perfect every little thing that it's just unfeasible to actually get this stuff out to you. Outside of that, I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.